Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Latin American Racing Channel and our co-host, the Jockey Club, I welcome you to the second Pan American Conference here in Washington, D.C. First and foremost, we want to thank everyone who made this conference possible. To the IFHA, the Stronach Group, Longines, and all our sponsors, thank you for believing in us and committing to this event. Your support gives us the energy to move forward and keep growing with our beloved racing industry. We'd like to thank our partners from the Jockey Club. It's a great team, and they are great friends as well. Thank you for your commitment and hard work. It's an honor for us to share this passion with you and to work together as one, always achieving new goals with efforts and dedication. Furthermore, we want to thank the speakers who will share the knowledge and perspectives on different topics throughout these 2 days. And of course, thank you to everyone who came from all over the world to be part of this experience. This year, we choose Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. We feel such an international city responds to the nature of our event and of the racing industry. But reaching new goals and moving forward can never be achieved without what we, from LARC, believe is our core value, integrity. This is an industry with hundreds of years of history, and it's worthy our commitment to do what's right. We should defend integrity in every discipline that is involved with the racing industry, whether this be in the areas of betting, medication, bloodstock, and all others. For us, the willingness to act with honesty is not just an add value, but also the foundation of our company. It is the bridge that connects us with our peers and the grounds on which we plant our trust with each other. We have the duty to preserve this value that has been given to us, passed on through generations that came before us, and we should respect it in such a way that we pass it on to the next generation as well. Throughout these 2 days of the conference leading up to the Preakness Stakes on Saturday, we'll be discussing the most important and up-to-date issues on the industry of horse racing. We have summoned the highest level of professionals to share their view and expertise on the different topics, some of which are training, aftercare, gaming operation, sports broadcasting, international ratings, classification, marketing, stud book issues, and importing and exporting of block stocks, and thoroughbred breeding and racing. Along with the discussion panels, we have prepared a number of social events at different iconic landmarks around Washington, D.C., ending with a celebration of the 142nd Preakness Stakes. We consider this second conference an opportunity to exchange knowledge, to share our vision and expertise. We hope you find it highly informative forum while also constructive and practical to your businesses. Once again, a warm welcome to everybody, and thank you for coming, and we hope you make the most out of the experience. Thank you. Now, I would like to introduce one of our 2 MCs who should keep our proceedings on track for the next 2 days. Our first MC's voice has been heard around the world and always keeps us dreaming in his 43-year career, as he called over 80,000 thoroughbred races from the Breeders' Cup to the Kentucky Derby to the Preakness to Belmont Stakes. His voice is forever linked to some of the greatest races in American thoroughbred history. Let's take a look and listen to one of those 80,000 races called.
And he sweeps to the lead with a dramatic rush with 3 furlongs to go. And Jerry Bailey turns him loose, and he guides him down to the rail as the field turns for home. Unaccounted for down inside, a quarter of a mile between Cigar and a perfect season. Coming down to the last furlong with a 2.5 length lead. And Jerry Bailey calls on Cigar for everything he has. The carrier is awakening second on the inside, unaccounted for. On the outside, Solo the Manor, and here he is, the unconquerable, invincible, unbeatable
please welcome to the stage Tom Durkin.
Good.
Our co-MC for this year's conference is somewhat of a race-calling ambassador. His talent, energy, and positive outlook have endeared him in racing enthusiasts all over the globe. From his start in the late 1970s, calling races at Hipódromo Presidente Ramón in his native Panama, to his current position of providing year-round Spanish-language race call at Aqueduct Racetrack, Belmont Park, Saratoga Racecourse, he has shared the excitement of thoroughbred racing with millions of Hispanic racing fans around the world. I know that those who attend our conference in New York will remember his race, but perhaps you have not heard the comment called quite like this.
Cuerpo y medio, Trotter va entrando segundo, entró a la recta final, American Pharoah mantiene el comando por dos cuerpos, Trotter va avanzando segundo, faltando 2:50, American Pharoah mantiene el comando por dos cuerpos, segundo está corriendo Trotter, American Pharoah está botando con 3, 4, 5 cuerpos, American Pharoah se gana la triple corona, Víctor Espinosa, Papá Ferizayas, se gana la triple corona, segundo.
Damos la bienvenida al escenario a Luis Grandinson.
All right, Luis, how are you? Good
Hi,
see you,
nice to
brother.
meet you.
How are you? And Pablo, thank you very much, and bienvenido, Luis. That's about the extent of my Spanish, so we'll keep it there. It's indeed a pleasure to share the stage with my colleague, Luis Grandison. Not many of you quite realize that people often mistake Luis and myself. We're very close to looking alike. It could be because of our youthful looks, our impeccable sense of style, and our deep affection for all things Panama. And by the way, I ruined that hat just 2 weeks ago, but that's another story. It's practically impossible to tell us apart, Luis.
You are my long-lost brother.
Yes, gracias, hermano.
On more serious note, we just share a love of thoroughbred racing, just like all of the wonderful people in this ballroom who have come here to listen and learn more about the issue affecting the thoroughbred industry across the world and opportunities that lie ahead. Over the next 2 days, we hope that you get to know each other better, not only during the business section, but at break, lunch, evening social, even on course at the Prix de State. Speaking of the Prix de Tom, are you planning to go?
Oh, I'd say there's a pretty good chance I'd be going, yes.
You sound like a man who may have the inside story on which horse to bet.
Inside story, yeah, you could say that, actually.
Would you like to share the rest of with the rest of the group?
Oh, no, I would not want to influence anyone here in any way as far as betting goes.
Dreaming.
Yes. I wouldn't want to lead anyone on to betting a favorite of theirs otherwise.
Always dreaming. Just lost audio.
Yes. Or I could tell you that I am part owner of the winning horse in the Kentucky Derby, Always Dreaming. Thank you very much.
So you are not going to give us any tips?
No, that's not the case. I'm going to give you a lot of tips right now. First of all, we want you to visit our exhibit area whenever you have a chance. Our exhibitors are from all over the world, and they are fundamental to the thoroughbred industry. Next, the lanyard about your neck is your guide. If you haven't realized it, the schedule for the conference is right on the back side. And the conference magazine not only contains the schedule, but has some really great information on each of our sponsors. These are organizations that have come together to make the Pan American Conference a reality. Our thanks to them, and make sure you read more about them in the magazine. And also for the technically savvy, myself excluded, those in the room, check out the conference app. You'll find speaker bios, schedules, and you will have the ability to connect with other conference attendees by adding your contact information to the app and receive and send messages. And be sure to join in conversation on social media, following the conference on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and use the hashtag PanAmDC2007. Now, if that is outside your ken, all I need to tell you is just contact your 5-year-old niece or nephew, and they'll show you how to do all that stuff. Finally, we have our volunteers, Natalie attired in black and white, and if you need any help, they've got the answers for you. Have I forgotten anything, Luis? Olvidar todos.
Only one thing I can think of.
And that would be?
Sit back, relax, enjoy the conference. We have a terrific line of speakers and panelists, and they are very excited to get out here and get started. So, Tom, will you introduce our next speaker?
I would be happy to, thank you, if you evacuate the stage and make room for him.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker has many ties to our host city, Washington, D.C. In fact, he has served under a United States Secretary of State. He was a legislative and foreign policy assistant to 2 United States senators and received his Juris Doctor in law just up the road here at Maryland, the University of Maryland. In thoroughbred circles, his family name has been synonymous with success. His parents campaigned the great champion Ruffian, and he, through a partnership with the Phipps stable, campaigned Kentucky Derby winner Orb and numerous other graded stakes winners. He serves on the boards of several Jockey Club companies, as well as the board of the New York Racing Association. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming the chairman of the Jockey Club, Stuart S. Janney III. Good morning, sir.
Well, that was a lot easier for Tom to do. The last time he introduced me was a huge cocktail party with food and drinks spread around everywhere, and I can't remember what you said or did, but it was extraordinary. I've never seen a room grow silent so quickly.
That's what you do when you just say, "Shut up."
Something like that. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Jockey Club and our good friends at the Latin American Racing Channel, it's a pleasure to welcome you to our second Pan Am conference. We deeply appreciate the effort you've made to be here with us, and I think a little bit earlier, Pablo gave you a good idea of what you might expect over the next several days. We at the Jockey Club are very proud of this conference. It's drawn more than 400 registered guests, and you're coming from over 24 countries. It has become a very important and truly international event. I think I'm going to take a moment to reflect on at least a part of the world of horse racing, how it has evolved in recent years and how it's likely to continue in the years to come, because I think that is in large part why this conference is so important. Most of us, certainly all of us with a little seniority, have considered horse racing in the past from a far less global perspective. In fact, it's been a very local one. As Tom said, I grew up in Maryland. You're going to be there at Pimlico on Saturday. And the names that were important to me were three. It was Pimlico, Laurel, and a racetrack called Bowie that no longer exists. In other words, the Maryland Racing Circuit. We stable our horses at Laurel and only occasionally shipped a horse to New Jersey or New York. We never shipped a horse to California, and we only did it when we thought we would be extraordinarily competitive. So let's pose the question, why is racing in this country, really unlike any other nation, controlled on a state basis? 36 different jurisdictions, I think. Well, I think the answer, for the most part, that it's a system which is a vestige of the past, not something you would ever create with a clean sheet of paper. Well, of course, the past became less relevant with the advent of satellite technology in the early 1980s, and of course that brought on simulcasting. Its growth has bolstered purses and effectively brought a whole new distribution system and platform for the fans of horse racing, and most particularly for the bettors. And second, how easy it's become to ship our horses anywhere in the world. Put them on a plane so that they can maximize their opportunities. All this was a win for the bettor, who instead of analyzing 9 or 10 races, now had the ability to select from dozens of races, choose which one to bet on. And of course, those races were first delivered via closed circuit TV, and now it's a dedicated cable channel and live streaming. For the owner, purses grew and new opportunities were available to win the best purses, the most prestigious races. So racing in this country has come from first being a state business to a regional business, and now it is clearly a national one. Do we stop there? No. As we all know, great racing occurs in every time zone. Somewhere the sun is shining and conditions are perfect for putting on our show. And because of technology, improvements in communication, and substantial improvements in travel, our oceans have turned into rivers. Racing managers around the globe can take advantage of these opportunities, and they do. International racing festivals will expand even further in Japan, Hong Kong, Europe, in this country, Arlington Park, Belmont. And I think in the United States, we should be and are proud of what the Breeders' Cup has been to the world, a catalyst to promote globalization and to improve the chances of others having such events. The Longines World's Best Racehorse rankings play an increasingly important part in linking us together. Just look at the diversity of the horses ranked at the present time above 120. You got 4 from Australia, 2 from the United States, 1 from the UK, 1 from France, and 1 from Hong Kong. This globalization I've described isn't limited to just racing. We see stallions from one part of the world gain prominence in another part. There are dozens of examples. Sadler's Wells was a Kentucky bred who was the leading sire in Great Britain for more than 10 years. Street Cry was an Irish bred who raced in the United States and the UAE and was a leading sire in the United States. Candy Ride was an Argentine bred who was undefeated in Argentina and the U.S., and a very successful sire here. Wolfhound, a U.S. bred, stood in South Africa, was the leading sire in South Africa. the late Scat Daddy, U.S.-based sire who shuttled to Chile and sired countless winners in that country. And of course, Sunday Silence became one of Japan's most prominent sires after winning the Derby, the Preakness, and the Breeders' Cup Classic in the United States. So what should we be thinking in the United States? We have to go global. But with that comes the responsibility to have one set of rules, one set of penalties, effective and credible enforcement. And all of that has to be consistent with our international partners. After all, they don't play soccer 15 different ways across the globe. Now, they do call it by 2 different names, but that's irrelevant. Now, that brings us back to this conference, and what I hope you will take from the next couple of days. You have the opportunity to better understand how things are done in other parts of the world. You can gain insight into the best practices in a variety of racing markets. Perhaps most importantly, you get to build and strengthen relationships with international counterparts. Internet technology with apps such as FaceTime and Skype have indeed brought the world closer. But I think we all appreciate that the best relationships are personal relationships. We're very proud to show off some of the museums and monuments here in the District of Columbia. And I think you'll be impressed with the quality of racing that you will see on Saturday at Pimlico. But the main goals of this conference are to learn about better policies, better practices, and to build stronger relationships. In the end, that's really the best way to measure the success of this conference. Before I close, I want to acknowledge the support of all our sponsors, and especially Longines and the Stronach Group. Longines has invested heavily in the sponsorship of our sport all over the world, and our affiliation with such a highly regarded brand reflects positively on thoroughbred racing. Thank you once again, Juan Carlos Capelli. The Stronach Group deserves our thanks as well. They've opened their arms to welcoming us to several important racing events over the last several years. And we'll get to sample their unparalleled hospitality again at a gala on Friday night, and of course at the Preakness Stakes on Saturday. I think it will be, I hope it will be, a memorable few days for all of you, and we thank you once again for being here with us to enjoy them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well done. Just a little bit of Washington presidential trivia vis-a-vis horses. One of my favorite presidents, Ulysses S. Grant, was a horrible student. Our 18th president graduated near the very bottom of his class at West Point, but that boy could horseback. He was known as one of the greatest riders. If he wasn't going to be president of the United States, if he dropped a little weight, he probably could have been one of the great jockeys. And on graduation day at West Point, they said, okay, you're not such a great student, but would you put on a show for us? And he went out and gave a great equestrian demonstration at graduation. And the real reason is that Grant is one of my favorites is because he was a horse player and he used to go to Saratoga all the time. Another great horsey president was Teddy Roosevelt. They were renovating, when he was president, they were driving cars at that point, and they wanted to renovate the White House and turn the stables into a garage. And he said, hell no, we Roosevelts are horse people. And we need more Teddys, I suppose you could say, in that vein. And welcome to honor another horse person to the stage. Hailing from the heart of horse country in Lexington, Kentucky, he is a United States Representative for Kentucky's 6th Congressional District. He is focused on strengthening industries important to Kentucky, including the equine industry. He serves as co-chair of the bipartisan, that's a word you don't hear in Washington much anymore, bipartisan, the Bipartisan Congressional Horse Caucus, and is a co-sponsor of the Horse Racing Integrity Act. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, this is one of the guys that has our backs in Congress. Please welcome to the stage Congressman Andy Barr. Thank you, sir. Good to see you. Great. I'll be better when
Good morning. Tom, thanks so much. I love that voice. Reminds me of all the great races that you've called. I think the statistic is over 80,000 races that you've called. So appreciate your contribution to this industry that we all love. Great to be with you at the Pan American Conference. Welcome to Washington, D.C. Welcome to the United States. Many of you, I guess, are heading over to the Preakness, so enjoy that. And it's my privilege to represent Lexington, Kentucky, the horse capital of the world, and the surrounding bluegrass region in Congress. We like to think we are the horse capital of the world with Keeneland and with all of the 400-plus thoroughbred breeding operations in and around the bluegrass region. But the fact that we're here with an international audience in the Pan American Conference is, once again, more evidence that this is truly an international sport and an international industry, and why we need to be competitive here in the United States with racing around the world. As co-chairman of the Congressional Horse Caucus, I've had a great opportunity to work, as Tom said, across the aisle with I'm a Republican working with a Democrat from New York, Paul Tonko, in supporting reforms to the thoroughbred industry here in the United States. We introduced in the last Congress a bill called the Thoroughbred Horse Racing Integrity Act. We're poised to reintroduce that legislation in the next couple of weeks. And I want to reflect briefly about why I think federal legislation is needed in the United States and what needs to happen going forward to achieve our ultimate objective of enhancing safety and integrity in thoroughbred racing with national uniform medication standards. First, why is federal legislation necessary? To be sure, we have much to celebrate here in the United States and around the world with thoroughbred racing. Our sport is as popular as ever, but we can't hesitate to point out that there's always more good than bad in racing, but we still need to improve on our product. Calls for reform should never be misinterpreted as destructive criticism of the sport we love. The reality is that there is tremendous competition for today's entertainment dollar, and the industry must continue to innovate to continue to win over new bettors and fans. Without new growth strategies, there is a real risk that our handle, the number of racetracks, racetrack attendance, the full crops, bloodstock sales, thoroughbred ownership, all of that is at risk of declining if we don't continue to innovate with this great sport. And this is an industry that generates over $3 billion annually in my home state of Kentucky alone. So it's important for jobs and for our communities. We hold the sport in high regard, but as the McKinsey study commissioned by the Jockey Club reveals, medication-related issues have undermined public confidence in the integrity of racing and adversely impacted fan perception of the sport. And this perception of doping has compromised the integrity of our sport in the eyes of bettors and fans and has hurt the export sales of American breeding stock to prospective buyers in foreign jurisdiction. The perception has been cultivated in part because thoroughbred racing labors under a diverse set of inconsistent and conflicting medication rules that vary from state to state here in our country. The industry has made notable strides in recent years to adopt uniform standards. I would point to the Racing Medication and Testing Consortium and also the NTRA and their Safety and Integrity Alliance. those are positive efforts and they need to be recognized. But the fact remains that today we still have a patchwork of inconsistent and conflicting rules. 38 different jurisdictions, and many of those jurisdictions simply have not adopted the National Uniform Medication Program or have adopted it only in part, and therefore we have different rules from the Kentucky Derby to the Preakness to the Belmont, and the Breeders' Cup and every other race in the country. And this is a problem because, as you know, not only is thoroughbred racing an international sport, but it's also, in our country, it's an interstate sport. More than half of all thoroughbred racehorses in the United States compete in multiple states in a given year, and over 80% of the handle is wagered through simulcast betting, and it is a national business. This lack of uniformity creates problems for owners, trainers, equine practitioners, and the betting public. Since the majority of industry handle is wagered across state lines through simulcast wagering, the absence of a national uniform set of rules impedes interstate commerce. So we think that we should unify American racing with a single uniform set of rules. And we're also realists. We recognize that some of racing's challenges are not solely attributable to the lack of uniformity. There's other challenges. There's competition for that entertainment dollar. But we also recognize that eliminating any and all excuses for young millennials to become fans of our sport is important innovation in terms of marketing and bringing more fans into the industry. And of course, our commitment to integrity, safety, and uniformity of rules is a great way to bring more people into the industry and bring in more fans. I would submit that the inability of the industry to develop its own national uniform rules for the past 36 plus years is probably the most persuasive argument for why we need federal legislation today. During previous Congresses, many well-meaning policymakers attempted to reform racing, but they haven't been able to do so. And I think despite their best efforts and despite falling short, we are not deterred by that. And we think that now is a good time to continue to double down on our efforts here. After listening to many constituents and industry participants, we got involved in this because we know that it's worth it to make the United States internationally competitive through uniform rules. Our efforts have paid off. In the last Congress, we were able to earn the bipartisan support of 88 members of Congress in support of our efforts. And the legislation that we proposed would simply create a non-governmental anti-doping authority that would create a national uniform set of medication rules, and we think would restore the perception of integrity, the reality of integrity, and certainly help us market American racing to the rest of the world in a more competitive way. Our inclusive efforts have allowed us to also earn the endorsements of nearly 20 different stakeholder organizations, which has in turn allowed us to earn support both inside the Congress and outside the Congress. And we're proud to announce that that coalition is growing with the endorsement of the Stronach Group here recently. But to continue our progress and to actually move this legislation forward, to achieve our ultimate objective of safety and integrity through national uniform standards, we must have a continual dialogue with the industry stakeholders. We want to be inclusive. We want to build consensus. We want to invite feedback from participants in the industry, and we've got an open and inclusive discussion about how we can improve the legislation to incorporate as many members of Congress as possible, and importantly, members of the industry. And only with this consensus approach can we ultimately enact the reform we need. I look forward to continuing the work of this uniform medication program legislation, and we certainly invite your feedback. Again, we welcome you to the United States. We thank you for your participation in this wonderful sport that we all love, and we invite all of you all to come to Kentucky and buy our racehorses at the Keeneland or Fasig-Tipton sales. We know that this is an international business, And we know that making sure that our breeding stock is perceived as the most competitive in the world is very important. And just as an example, I know Angel Contreras is here, and Mr. Contreras is a good example of the Latin American and, in this case, Dominican Republic investment in American thoroughbred racing. We want more of that, and we think that to have a robust equine industry in the United States, we need to have the highest level of integrity, and that's what we're working on in the Congress, and we invite your feedback, and we appreciate your attendance at today's conference. Thank you very much.
Good. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Congressman. And I just would like to say a word or two about Congressman Barr, who is a Republican who is working together with Congressman Paul Tonko, a Democrat from upstate New York. These two fellows don't care when it comes to horse racing about politics whatsoever. And we are very well served by individuals like that in the Congress that go there with the job to help the people, not their own partisan politics. And Andy and Paul have done a terrific job at that, having our backs in Congress. Our first panel of the day includes industry experts who are incredibly diverse in their backgrounds, their countries of origin, and their experience in racing abroad. They know what it takes to condition an equine athlete should an owner or trainer decide to venture outside of their native borders.
You will hear from Australian-born moderator who oversees race regulation from the Hong Kong Jockey Club.
And a fourth-generation French-born trainer who blazed a trail as the first female to win the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe.
Argentine trainer whose multi-generation background is breeding and racing in Landry and that part of the world, and is now making a name for himself in the United States.
And a native of Arkansas who was raised in Kentucky, this trainer has won more than 174 stakes, 74 of which are graded, and he also has an entrant in this Saturday's Preakness Stakes with senior investment who will attempt to defeat Always Dreaming.
And a Kentuckian who was studying in Ireland, spent a great amount of time overseas, and is now serving as the Senior Director of Racing and nomination for the British Cup.
So many countries and states represented here in just one panel. So please welcome the Chief Stipendiary Racing Steward for the Hong Kong Jockey Club, our moderator, Kim Kelly.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kim. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Firstly, on behalf of myself and my fellow panellists, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the organising committee for the very kind invitation to attend and present at this conference. We do hope that today's session will be one which you find of interest. It's very much an honour and a pleasure to be asked to be here today. The topic of today's session revolves around the various nuances associated with racing a horse away from its home jurisdiction, and primarily overseas, but also across a continent or across a country. Recent decades have witnessed the rise of international horse racing competition to the point where campaigning group or grade quality horses away from their home country has become very much a regular occurrence. Racing's governing body, the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities, and major racing jurisdictions have dedicated themselves to breaking down jurisdictional borders to encourage and support international competition. The IFHA work in respect of horse movement, rules harmonisation and horse welfare were all notable achievements which have greatly benefited international competition and wagering. The development of international race meetings and festivals such as the Breeders' Cup, Dubai World Cup, Melbourne Spring Carnival, Hong Kong International Races and Royal Ascot to name but a few, are examples of the importance placed upon creating major international racing events by racing jurisdictions for the purposes of encouraging international competition, establishing the best of the best within an age or gender group on a particular surface at a particular distance. The creation of incentives such as the Global Sprint Challenge, World's Best Racehorse Rankings, and the World's Top 100 Horse Races are demonstrations of the considerable efforts of prominent racing jurisdictions to encourage the best horses to compete in the best races, irrespective of where they are conducted. To achieve the promotion and encouragement of international competitions, racing jurisdictions have attached significant levels of prize money to these events to make them enticing goals for the connections of horses of an appropriate standard. In addition to the very obvious financial carrot which is dangled before the eyes of connections, there is also the prestige and the recognition for the horse, its trainer, and its connections, which comes with success at the very top level, away from the comfort zone of home. And the enduring legacy and reputation of horses successfully taking on the world is not to be understated. Horses such as Vintage Crop travelling from Ireland to Australia in 1993 to wrest away the time-honoured Melbourne Cup, Teppan conquering the Queen Anne Stakes at Royal Ascot last year, Black Caviar's win in the 2012 Diamond Jubilee Stakes at Royal Ascot, and Cesario winning the American Oaks for Japan in 2005 are just a few examples of instances where success away from home may have been worth far more than the prize money attached to those relevant races. And then we have horses such as Gym and Tonic and Red Cadeau, which may not necessarily be remembered as champions, but will forever be fondly recalled when discussions turn to outstanding and durable racehorses which seem to thrive on travel and were able to compete successfully in a multitude of different jurisdictions. Left-handed, right-handed, Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, dry tracks, rain-affected tracks, it didn't matter. They gave their all because they were competitors, and because of that quality and that attribute, they became very much horses for the people. And then we have horses which may not necessarily be well known, but which blaze trails for their respective jurisdictions, such as Mystical, winning for India in Dubai in 2007. But for every success story, there is a story of heartache, defeat, and disappointment. Apart from the obvious letdown of a horse simply not performing on the day to its usual high standard, there are instances such as the champion South African horse Chestnut breaking down after winning a group race at its first and only start in the United States by 5 lengths. Saintly suffering a debilitating bout of travel sickness and having to be withdrawn from a Japan Cup, a race which it seemingly had at its mercy. I'll Have Another being withdrawn from the third leg of the Triple Crown due to a swollen tendon after winning both the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness Stakes. Putting aside the veterinary issues which can affect a horse's ability to race away from home, there is also the issue of the rules and regulations in the overseas jurisdiction being different from what might be the case in the horse's jurisdiction of honour, the examples of which are numerous. Instances such as Takeover Target being withdrawn from its intended race in Hong Kong due to a medication issue after previously winning Group 1 races in England and Japan, and Dar Me being relegated after winning the 2009 Group 1 Prix Vermeil, when in a number of other jurisdictions the horse would have retained the race, only go to highlight the difficulties and in many cases frustrations of playing a game away from home. Does the lack of a universal set of harmonised racing rules compromise the ability of racing administrators to make the sport truly global from a competition perspective? Do trainers, jockeys, owners, and indeed the punting public who help support the industry shy away from international wagering into commingled betting pools due to a lack of confidence that one day they might lose their money in jurisdiction A, when a similar set of circumstances in jurisdiction B the following day results in a different outcome? Or do trainers and connections simply take a glass half full approach, that whilst one day they might be on the debit side of the ledger and lose out in unfortunate circumstances, they may just as readily be the beneficiaries of the same application of the rules and regulations in the foreign jurisdiction? So whilst the rewards and the glory of campaigning a horse can be significant, it can be a double-edged sword. So what are the principal factors which influence a decision from trainers and connections to take a horse away from its normal confines to race? Does the value of the horse play a part? Is it simply risk versus reward? Do the different rules and regulations between jurisdictions have connections second-guessing whether invitations to participate should be accepted? Does the present and future reputation of the horse, its trainer, or the connections play a role in seeking glory away from home? What about the quarantine issues, different training facilities and conditions, the climate abroad compared to that at home? If they are different from what the horse and the trainer is accustomed to, does this influence a decision to travel? Are there advantages to a horse flying abroad as close to possible to its intended race? Or are jurisdictions entitled to stipulate that horses arrive well in advance of the race so as to ensure the horses have sufficient time to overcome any travel-related issues, and for the jurisdiction hosting the event to be comfortable that the horse is clear of medications when the race is run, and addressing any perception that visiting horses are not at any competitive advantage or disadvantage? There are some studies available which tend to the view that horses which raced in a jet-lagged state can be an advantage over horses which are required to arrive sometime prior to the race. Hong Kong, for instance, stipulates that visiting horses must arrive at least 8 days prior to the intended race. Breeders' Cup requires horses to arrive 72 hours prior to the race. These measures are put in place so that the club or the relevant jurisdiction can ensure compliance with its stated goal of prohibited substance-free racing. And then there is the experience of the owner. As jurisdictions have increased their focus on enticing international competition to complement their domestic racing program, it has become of vital importance for owners to be shown a good time, so that A, they gain maximum enjoyment from the experience of racing abroad or away from home, B, they are suitably enticed to return if the circumstances permit, and C, to return to their home country to preach the gospel, so to speak, of the memorable experience they were shown, so as to encourage other like-minded owners to accept the challenge of travel. So when consideration is being given as to whether to race a horse away from home, how important is the owner's experience to the final decision? To discuss the various issues surrounding the competing factors influencing a decision to travel a horse, both from a trainer and administrator perspective, we have a notable panel moderated by a notable regulator. Firstly, we have Cricket head Marek. Cricket is a fourth-generation member of French racing royalty. After commencing training in 1977, she became the first female trainer to win the time-honoured Prix d'Arc de Triomphe with 3 troikas, just 2 years after being granted a licence. And no reference to cricket and the Arc would be complete without reference to the Imperious Trèves, which she conditioned to win 2 Arcs, a champion trained by a legend. In addition to her outstanding career achievements in her native France, Cricket has trained winners in Canada, Germany, Great Britain, Singapore, and the United States. She has been president of the French Trainers Association since 1998, president of the European Trainers Association between 2007 and 2016, a committee member of France Gallo, and a committee member of the French Breeders' Association. Ladies and gentlemen, cricket head Marek. Ignacio Correas is a member of a racing family steeped in tradition. Ignacio continued his family's rich tradition when at a young age he spent time working in a stable in Palermo before travelling to France in 1979 to obtain valuable experience with Mr. Alec Head, the father of Cricket Head. And he also spent time in France with trainer David Smaga. After returning to Argentina, Ignacio commenced training in 1983, where he trained Group 1 horses such as Pier 17, Southern Filly and Overspeed. In 2001, he relocated to the United States and variously worked with William Badgett Jr., Mr. William Lindsay Curran, Southern Equine and Sagamore Farm, during which time he enjoyed notable success with horses such as Million Reasons Why, Humble and Hungry, Walk with Purpose, Monzon, Hamp, Charge Cotton and Tiger Walk. At the end of 2015, he moved to Lexington, Kentucky and commenced training publicly with his son Benjamin and travelled to Kasekhe to finish runner-up in last year's Arlington Million. Ladies and gentlemen, Ignacio Correas. Kenny McPeak has won more than 174 stakes races during his noteworthy training career to date, 74 of which have been in graded races. In 2002, he achieved what most trainers aspire to by winning a leg of the Triple Crown when Saraba was successful in the Belmont Stakes. He has trained in excess of 1,500 winners with earnings of more than $71 million. In addition to Saraba, he won back-to-back Spinster Stakes with Take Charge Lady and back-to-back Gulfstream Breeders' Cups with Hard Buck, a horse he sourced and acquired from Brazil, and Prince Arch in 2004-2005. Following Hard Buck's win at Gulfstream, Kenny travelled the horse firstly to Dubai to run second in the Shima Classic, still to this day America's best result in the race, and then to England to again finish second in the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Stakes. Kenny serves on boards of the University of Kentucky College of Agricultural Equine Program Advisory Committee, the Thoroughbred and Breeders Association, and the National Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association. He starts senior investment in Saturday's Preakness Stakes, and in next month travels Daddy's Little Darling to the English Oaks in Epsom. Ladies and gentlemen, representing the follically impaired, such as me, Kenny McPeak. And finally, the not-so-follically impaired Josh Christian. Josh is the Senior Director of Racing and Nominations for Breeders' Cup Limited. After graduating from the University of Kentucky with Bachelor of Science in Animal Science and Economics, Josh commenced his racing career at the Irish National Stud in Kildare, Ireland, before returning to the States in the position of sales coordinator with his current employer, Breeders' Cup Limited. In 2006, he transferred to Paramount Sales in the position of account manager before returning to Breeders' Cup in 2008 as Director of Racing before being promoted into his current role. He currently splits his time between the United States and Europe in order to ensure that the Breeders' Cup retains its rightful place as one of the world's preeminent international racing festivals. Ladies and gentlemen, Josh Christian. Welcome everybody. Cricket, as should always be the case, we're starting ladies first. So when a trainer's considering racing a horse overseas or away from its home ground, what are the principal factors that you're looking for in the horse to decide whether it's a suitable horse? Is it the value of the horse? Is it the temperament? Is it the experience to the owner?
Well, when we come abroad, you have to come with the best horse you've got. You don't come abroad to no country with a mother-head horse, so you always pick one of your good horses to come and compete. And then everything is important. Prize money is important for the owner, and even for the trainer and everybody who surround the horse. the way we're traveling, the way the horses are handled here. We've got a traveling head lad who goes with him and his boy who follow him, and then we do the best we can for the horse to be in an excellent position to come and race abroad.
How important is the horse's temperament? Is it the key to the decision?
Yes, because some horses don't travel very well, so we avoid to do so. And if we have a horse who travels well, there's no problem.
Kenny, I mentioned the fact that you took Hardbuck over to Dubai and to Royal Ascot. Again, what are the decisions that you have to? What are the factors that you have to look at when deciding against racing at home or racing away?
Well, in his case, he was a horse that he had competed at a high level everywhere, and we knew that he would be competitive wherever we took him. But I was fortunate, and I had met Nick Chain in Dubai, and on a flight home from Dubai, we actually had a layover in London of 7 hours, and I was fortunate to walk Epsom and Ascot during the visit. So it gave me a visual and physical chance to really figure out what I was going to deal with. And then changing direction with a horse is, I think, relatively easy. In his case, that horse had some physical issues that I think because he had been running left-handed his entire career, really changing direction was good for him. And so it really depends on the animal, but in his case, going right-handed at Ascot, he actually relished it. It was almost like it injected new life into him. So that was an interesting experience. But each horse is different, and I love the challenge of it. And in his case, the prize money was fantastic. I think it was $1.5 million for and $350 to run second. Of course, we would have loved to have won it, but it's the adventure and it's sporting of it all.
Ignacio, there's obviously a lot of challenges and difficulties involved with training a horse overseas. You've got different training facilities, you've got different training times, you've got climate issues. How do you see those as affecting whether or not you're going to take a horse overseas? Are they major obstacles that need to be overcome?
Well, I mean, as I say, it depends on the individual horse. The horses that make, things easier than other ones. Some horses travel good, some horses don't. In America, it's pretty easy to travel. I mean, we can handle it pretty good. And I think that when we move east or west, we're pretty good too. When you go, change hemispheres, especially when you come from South America to the States, you need to get, acclimatation. We need a lot of more time because the quarantine, it doesn't help you too much. You have to stay 7 days on a stall. I mean, the horse lost a lot in the quarantine, so it's tougher for those horses to, to come here and run off the plane or, and do it like that. I mean, we need some more time to get it done.
Well, training out of quarantine can often be difficult. You've often got horses that are isolated from the main population. How do you get over those challenges? And once you do get out of quarantine to train, you've got dirt tracks, turf tracks. How do you weigh all those factors up?
I don't think if you have a lot of places do, like Breeders' Cup, for example, they let you train, or Arlington with this turf festival does, or like Hollywood Park used to do, you name Cesario. I mean, they were able to have, specific times to train on their own. And like that, I think that is very doable. Now, when you have to spend in a facility 7 days, no grain, only hay, not move from the stall, not even walk, and then get from there and go to a race that you're gonna compete against, first-class horses, it make it almost impossible.
Kenny, I saw you nodding your head there. Your experiences as regards to, again, training in quarantine or isolated from the general population, different surfaces to what you might be used to?
Well, the South American horses are really at a huge disadvantage because the quarantine's unacceptable. You can't train in the quarantine. You don't even get to touch your horse. And horses lose weight coming 7 days. It's just, it's something that the industry needs to address here. But the South American horses, I think because they come in, they have that issue. It's almost impossible to run them straight off the plane. it is impossible, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
And then, so then I believe that, especially fillies coming from South America, the issue is the cycles. So you think about a broodmare cycles, the fillies in particular, they have to change direction on their cycles. So they're used to going, spring, summer, fall, and then obviously they got to go the other way, and their coats go through a certain change that you have to be patient to get through. And like he says, you have to, typically I think 6 months plus or minus is a good number. But if you could eliminate the quarantine, it would make the steps easier. And I think going the other way, it's hard too. And going to Europe is relatively easy. Going from Europe back is no problem, but going north-south is much more difficult. And I think the Australian, the quarantine there is even longer.
Josh, we've heard from the trainers. Obviously, it's your job to deal with the trainers, to try and source the horses, to encourage them to come, to talk to the owners, to make the Breeders' Cup a viable option, to make it a place where they want to be. How do you address those sort of queries when the trainers bring them to you? What about quarantine? What about training facilities? What time are we going to have to train as compared to what time I can train at home?
It's really one of the last things we would ever worry about. Most of our horses come from Europe and they're in and out of quarantine after 42 hours. So we have great relationships with the BHA and the United States Department of Agriculture and shipping companies and licensing companies, so it's pretty easy. It's like Mike DeCalk bought a horse named Eagle Mountain one time. He said it's like shipping a letter. So they're usually in quarantine, they get to the States on Saturday, they're out on Monday. It's pretty simple for the most part, at least for the Europeans.
Okay. And cricket, we mentioned before that you've trained winners all over the world. Does it take time to get used to the training facilities? Is there an art? Is there an art to being able to take a horse away from Shanti and then to take it to Singapore in the humid climate and train it on an artificial track or whatever the case may be?
Alors, usually it's very easy. They make things simple. But when I went to Singapore, I went three weeks before the race because of the climate. I wouldn't go like I do if I come to the States. I try to come very close to the race, except for Breeders' Cup because we have to be here 8 days before. But if not, I go out of the plane and we race. If we arrive on Friday, there's 1 day quarantine and then you run for the race, and that's very good. But the facility all over the world, it's getting easier. Australia is a longer time in quarantine, but facility when you're there, it's very good. I mean, they try to do the best for us and for the horse, and so it's not a big deal.
Okay. We've heard cricket say there that they try and do the best thing for the horse. Ignacio, what about the owner? How important is the owner's experience when you decide to travel a horse? Or is it simply about there's a race up there that this horse can win, it's got good prize money, and forget about what the owner's?
Well, owner is always important, but I think that if you don't have the horse, I mean, the most important thing is the horse, that the quality of the horse, fit that race that you're gonna go. And when you have that kind of horse, I think that it's easier to get the owner on board and take him or convince him that you think that that's the good spot for him.
And Josh, it's a competitive market. We've mentioned Breeders' Cup, we've mentioned Royal Ascot, Dubai, the Hong Kong International Races, the Melbourne Spring Carnival. The competition for horses and for trainers and for connections is increasing all the time. What do you have to do as an administrator and a person that lures horses to your particular event? What do you have to do to make sure that the owner's experience is such that they're going to want to go to the Breeders' Cup?
Well, I think first is we have 13 races worth $28 million, which kind of dwarfs anywhere in the world outside of Dubai. That's a big thing. Second of all, I think it's huge on experience. I think it's very important to put on great hospitality, parties for people. I mean, sometimes it's like we had a horse this year, it took a lot to get it there, and it comes and 3 days before the race it scratches. Came all the way from England, it meant a lot. So it's kind of disheartening. We see the guys on Saturday, and they couldn't thank us enough for the time they had. Now, they didn't get it to even run, but they had a wonderful, wonderful experience. We have a great team that puts on parties, and we just really look after people. I think it's really important.
Okay, so you find it important to the degree that looking after them, not only for now, but for the future as well?
Well, at the end of the day, if you have 13 races, 13 people leave with trophies. You'll have 140, 150 ownership groups that leave without trophies. You better make sure they left like they won.
Okay. And cricket, when you're looking to take a horse overseas, what are you looking for assistance-wise from the racing jurisdiction? Are you looking for travel subsidies, accommodation paid, flights, quarantine assistance, veterinary assistance?
We have to look at everything. We have to organize everything, so we looked at everything, except in the case of Breeders' Cup, who's very well organized. But I mean, if not, the trainer has to do everything.
So
from prize money, from everything, you know, you come abroad to any country, you have to organize the flights and everything. But every country is very helpful with us. So I would say maybe one of the countries more difficult to go for us is to go to Japan, because it's very expensive. There's VIT problems, and that's very expensive to send a horse over there.
Right.
But saying so, everybody is very helpful. The Jockey Club will receive horses. They try to do the best to help, you know, foreign people to come and travel.
Okay, Kenny, did you have any experience on that front as to whether some place is more appealing than others because of what's provided to you, to your horse, your connections?
Adrian Beaumont helps us with a lot of our details with the IRB. You know, we love the fact that we can take a horse over there and, you know, we don't have to worry about licensing. He handles, he's actually, today we were working on Jockey for the English Oaks. It's detail. The owner needs to be, she needs limousine, she needed accommodations, she had some physical issues. We're hitting all the details. So yeah, we have to jump through all those hoops. I myself would love to be able to run a horse in a race like the Pellegrini one day, or some of those big races in South America. I know the prize money isn't all that great, but for the sporting of it all, but right now it's, you know, you've got a lot of limits on being able to do that. And we've entertained Melbourne Cup, and I think they are really accommodating on those details. You'd have to train at a particular racetrack, and you have to work your quarantine out there, but more than anything, you got to make it fun, and you've got to hit all those details, and so the owner doesn't have to worry about anything.
Okay, you've mentioned the Pellegrini, the prize money being perhaps not up to what, say, a Melbourne Cup might be. What's the attraction then for you or for your owners to go to that particular race, to take a horse away from its normal confines, the comfort zone of home, to go down there?
It's a great day of racing. I mean, probably one of the better, you know, maybe less internationally known race days. They have a great time on that day, and you know, it's a super event, and I think I've attended it 9 or 10 times. But I think it'd be fun to run a horse in all those big types of races. But logistically, it's not easy, and you know, you definitely, like Cricket said earlier, you better bring a runner, no matter where you go.
So if that race club came to you and said, we want to make this easier for you, how can we make this easier for you? What are you going to be able to say to them to try and get you, to entice you, attract you to take a horse down there?
Well, I think it's got more to do with the USDA. You got to get through the Department of Agriculture hoops, going both directions, and you know, to be able to ship a horse down and back, and then you're going to be stuck in 7 days quarantine without grain, and your staff can't take care of your horse. So the risk doesn't really, you know, there's not enough reward there for that risk at this stage. Going to Europe, no problem. Dubai is a very easy place to get in and out of. They hold your hand through everything, make sure your staff's got accommodations. So, you know, whether that can be done in Southern Hemisphere as well, it's hard to say. But I think, you know, we're all here for the promotion of international, and so we've got to find solutions to all that.
Josh, we've mentioned the regulation of racing, the rules being different from one place to the next, and certainly in America from one state to the next, let alone across international borders. Is it an issue for you when you're trying to source horses from overseas that connections say to you, well, we're concerned about this set of rules which might be different for what we might play by at home?
No, they're really not, because for the most part, we're limited in where we go, Kentucky, California at the moment. we kind of bring in our, we try to do house rules and stuff like that, but we have great partnerships with the racetracks where we run. So at the most part, no one's ever really worried about different kind of rules. And when horses come, like I said, they're in and out of quarantine quick. They can train on whatever surface they want, be it turf, dirt. When we were in Keeneland, you know, everyone knows it poured rain the whole week. Luckily enough, they had a wonderful synthetic training surface that you had an ARC winner and a Triple Crown winner running around this, which would probably never happen ever again. So a lot of our tracks are so accommodating, and they just look after everyone. The logistics of the shipping and the rules, no one's really worried about that.
And Ignacio, is it a factor that you think about when you're considering taking a horse away from home, or you're just wherever you land that you play by their rules?
I mean, usually it's like the rules, I mean, they're different, but they're not as different as they used to be. Everybody is accommodating the rules. Every district is getting, closer and closer to the same rules in this, of the 38 different places that we run. Everybody is almost in the same place. I mean, there are very little differences. And I look where I go, you look at that because you have to, because some medications have a different withdrawal than other ones in states, and you can get in trouble if you don't read it. But other than that, I mean, you go, I mean, and I agree with him, sometimes you go even for the sport and to be, this is a sport and money is very important, but also the sportsmanship you have to keep his place.
Cricket, I mentioned the 2009 Prix Vermeil with Dar-Remy, which was a controversial race after she was relegated, where in some countries, particularly her home country, she probably would have retained the race. What view do you and your owners take when you're looking at whether to take a horse overseas? The fact that, is there any frustration involved in the fact that what happened in your home jurisdiction might be completely different in the same set of circumstances at another jurisdiction?
Yes, of course. They don't judge the races exactly the same in some different countries. Even in Europe, if you go to England and the interference in a race is not judged like in France because of the betting. Our situation in France, we've got a lot of combinations, in racing. In England, you bet winner or place. In France, there's a lot of things. So if a horse interferes, we get disqualified. But we know the rules everywhere. Jockeys rules, veterinarian rules, medication. So we take all the care we have. In France, it's free, medication free. For me, it's a very good rule. I think it should be like that in all the world. Medication free, you know exactly what you do.
But is it a frustration for you that if you run second in a race, say in England, where the winner would have been disqualified in France, but the winner retains the race in England, is that a frustration for you as a person at the coalface?
I'll tell you a story who happened to me. I won 2 Group 1 races the same year with the same horse, because they disqualified in both races the first horse, and I was second. A mare called Special Duty for Prince Khaled Abdallah. I won the Guineas, I was second, and they disqualified because the winner interfered and my filly moved, and it was really a good decision. But then I won the French Poule d'Essai Pouliches, who's the French Guineas, 10 days after. I was second, no interference with me, but the winner interfered with other horses and was disqualified. So, it goes both ways. Sometimes they take you off, sometimes they give you races. The steward judged the race, and you have to be, they try to be fair with the horses and the second or the third, so that's the name of the game. I mean, it's what can happen.
So it's swings and roundabouts. What you lose on one, you might pick up on the other. Ignacio, what's your...
It's like she said. I mean, when you go to a jurisdiction, you know the rules, and sometimes they're good for you, sometimes they go against you. But you do the best you can, and you know that everything that is done in good faith, and that's racing. I mean, you just, take what they give you, or just take what they take away from you.
But it's always hard for an owner to be disqualified.
Yeah.
whatever happened, if it's fair or not, it's always terrible, especially in Group 1 races.
Yes. Kenny, in some jurisdictions, or in a lot of jurisdictions, they have veterinary regulators in place that have final adjudication over whether a horse starts in a race. Now, those veterinary regulators might not necessarily be as accustomed to the horses as you are or as your home veterinarian is. Is that a concern going forward, that you've got vets that are looking at horses making decisions on whether they're suitable to race, that might not necessarily know the horse's action if it's only getting there, say, 72 hours prior to the race? And if that is a frustration, how can you get around it?
It's not been a frustration for me, because the horses that you're talking about that are racing at a high level, these are particularly sound horses. These aren't horses with issues. The middle and the lower level horses are getting scrutinized a whole lot more than the upper level horses. If you've got a top class horse that has an odd way of moving, I think it's rare, but I'm sure it does happen. But in my case, I can't say that I have any experience with that. You know, in the U.S., they really do concern themselves a lot, track veterinarian, with analyzing and reanalyzing and getting a lot of details pre-race here in the United States. I have strong feelings about what we do here with medication in the U.S. I think we need to eliminate medication from all graded races. And who takes leadership on that, whether it's the Graded Stakes Committee or the Breeders' Cup, I think the sooner we do that, the better off we'll be. I don't find a need to treat a horse with medication for those kind of races whatsoever. It's so minimal, and the standards are, you know, Olympic standards are better already, but we really don't need race day Lasix here, and I think the sooner the sport or the United States addresses that particular issue, the better. But as far as the veterinarians, they're fair, especially with these good quality horses.
Josh, Kenny's just mentioned the Breeders' Cup there in that reference. Did you have any views on that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, in regards to the vets, what we have is an independent kind of vet team that comes in, and they're made up of different state vets from around the country, as well as one from the BHA that come in. They look at every horse all week long, which, you know, there's usually about 150 horses at the Breeders' Cup, and they all have to be there 72 hours before they run. It's like Kenny said, at that level, very seldom is there ever an issue, but they're all still looked after every day just to make sure everything's up and up.
Okay then. Josh, the level of communication that's provided from a racing jurisdiction to the horse person, obviously they have their horseman's handbooks, which mention all types of different nuances. I think Ignacio mentioned earlier about the medication issues and everything like that. Is the level of communication between racing jurisdictions and the horsemen, is it up to a suitable level, do you believe?
Yeah, we produce something called the Horseman's Information Guide, which is a 140, 150 page Breeders' Cup Bible, and medication, hotels, licensing, race conditions, everything in the world. Now, as you know, especially people in this industry, you can send them everything in the world. Getting them to read it might be a little different. So it also takes a lot of personal communication as well.
Okay, and that personal communication is instituted by you to them, telling them what the main aspects of what they need to know?
Well, you know, you develop these relationships with people, so you have to hold their hands on a lot of stuff, be it hotels or booking flights and when certain withdrawal periods. But it's pretty easily done. It just takes a lot of communication.
Kenny, you're about to take a horse over to Epsom for the English Oaks. The level of communication that you're receiving from the overseas jurisdiction in respect of what you can and cannot do, is it up to speed?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've got to get vaccinations in order. We've got blood tests to detect for any steroid use, which obviously we haven't used whatsoever. You know, it's once again detail after detail. We work with IRT, the shipping company. They send us a list of everything that we need to have organized and ready to go. You've got to get all the documentation for the horse's passport prior to getting on the flight. It's relatively simple. You know, I delegate a lot of it off to my office staff, and you know, of course, our veterinarians have to fill out certain forms. But this isn't rocket science. It's from our perspective, it's just part of the job.
Cricket is something that jurisdictions could be doing better to get the information to the horsemen the type of information that they need?
I think it's very well done. We've got in the path and race book, every jurisdiction tell you what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. So there's no problem on what you have to put on a horse. But I'm in favor to make the rules all over the world the same for racing purpose, because then it's easier. But you can't say, I didn't know, because it's written. So every country gives you the rule, and you can't say, I didn't know.
So when Josh sends something from the Breeders' Cup to you, is that information getting to you, or is it getting waylaid along the way? Does it go to the person that needs to know the most?
Absolutely, it comes to the trainer. We receive everything. It's very well done.
Okay.
But every country does the same. When you go abroad and you tell them that you're going to, they give you their rules, and you know. And a trainer is his job to know what's the rule.
Josh, we mentioned the quarantine situation, and I think there's been a couple of references made to Australia and the difficulties that are associated with Australia as far as quarantine goes. You've got pre-export quarantine, you've got post-arrival quarantine, as well as the place where you compete. Are quarantine issues a disincentive for people to travel? But you know, you've got South Africa as well, so
you would have to hit me right in the heart, wouldn't you? That's I think a ridiculous kind of quarantine situation. If the world is scared of African horse sickness, and African horse sickness shows signs in a horse 12 to 14 days after it gets it, why in the world would the United States expect you to ship a horse, put it in a stall for 60 days when it would be dead in 2 weeks? It just doesn't make sense to me. It's just an archaic kind of rule. So, but for most of the world, it's easy. It's a couple days, but certain parts of the world, South America is ridiculous. South Africa is just, I don't know, it makes no sense at all.
Okay, well let's focus on South America then. Obviously, there's a market down there for your horses, or the type of horses that you'd be looking for to compete. Not just the Europeans, not just the Americans, but the South Americans as well. What can you do as a racing administrator to try and get that situation sorted out?
So what we do, we have a handful of Breeders' Cup Challenge races down there. One is in next weekend. What that does, horses win those races, it gets their entry fees waived. And what also happens, any horse that comes from South America to the Breeders' Cup gets $40,000 to ship. Now, most of those races, he says it takes forever for those horses to acclimate. They're May, June, early in the time of the year, so it gives them plenty of time to come and acclimate to be ready by November.
Okay, and then so it's all about pre-warning the fact that this race is on the calendar. You know about it. You make the decision, you make the arrangements necessary to get it up there by November.
Exactly.
Rather than trying to change the quarantine rules. Okay. Cricket, the same to yourself. If you're looking at, say, a Melbourne Cup as compared to a Breeders' Cup marathon or whatever the case may be, how much is it a disincentive with the quarantine rules the way they are in Australia at present?
Well, it could be because, and now it's easier, but in the old days, I went to Australia to run once. We had to be a quarantine 1 month in France, in the south of France, because they think there's no mosquitoes over there. And then 1 month in Australia. So that was a long time, you know, for the horse to be away from his normal routine, and actually we ran very bad. But I don't say because of that. But now the quarantine is easier to go to Australia. It's getting better.
Okay,
but it should be the same in every country.
Okay, well you said that the quarantine didn't affect the horse's run, but did it affect it, do you believe? Were you able to train the horse as you wanted and have the horse as good as you wanted it on the day because of what had happened in the previous 2 months?
Yeah, there was not only the quarantine, there was a 38 hours flight because they sent a plane who took all the horses from Europe. So we jumped from France to England, to Ireland, to America, to Hawaii, and then we arrived in Australia. So it was a long, long flight, but that was a long time ago. So now it's much better. But still, of course, quarantine can be complicated for us. So I would rather come to America than go to Australia, to tell you the truth.
So it is a disincentive to travel,
Yes,
to
absolutely.
travel to that part of the
Little bit,
world
yes.
because of those regulations.
It's more, yeah, in those countries it's more difficult to get there.
Ignacio, some horse trainers around the world have developed wonderful reputations for being able to train horses away from their home jurisdiction with success and with distinction. How much of it is personal when you take a horse overseas and to race as compared to just the prize money and just what the owner gets? How much of it is a challenge to you personally?
Well, I mean, it's always a challenge for the trainers to train a horse. I mean, you have to, a part that is when you get a horse from another country, especially, I mean, from South America, the tracks are completely different than in America. I mean, they have long stretch, 1.5 mile, 1 turns, and we come here to mostly mile tracks. I mean, it's like kind of a period of, that you have to re-educate them if you want. But I mean, I think that you always go with individuals. Horses that, when they're good, and if you give them the right time, they will do right for you. And I think that the key word is being patient and convince your owner that you have to be patient with that horse that they bring from South America. And quarantine things is, I think that I will make a big difference, you know, in the quarantine. One thing is the quarantine that we have to have when we come from South America, that is like 7 days on a stall and all that. And a different thing is a quarantine that allowed you to train and to have your help taking care of your horse. You know, like Breeders' Cup allowed. I mean, you can be around your horse, you can train your horse after, you know, European horses can train after 42 hours. So it's a big difference when you can train and when you can have your help, or you can see your horse, that when you are isolated on a place, that nobody can touch your horse. I mean, that's really a complicated situation that I don't see how you can, you know, it should be easier to do it better. I mean,
And Kenny, when you go to the English Oaks next month, how important is it for you personally, for your reputation, to be able to take a horse away from its normal environment and to be able to race it with success over there?
Well, I'm not worried about my reputation. I think it's great fun. I think it's a blast taking those kind of trips. I think some American trainers and owners are real conservative and worried about, you know, things that they've never experienced. I mean, a horse race is a horse race, and it is just an absolute blast to take them. You know, when I went in 2004 with Hardbuck, they gave us no chance. And the horse ran fantastic. And if you've got a horse doing well and you've got an owner that's brave and wants to have a good time, it's super. Wesley Ward talked to me before he ever took his first horse over. You know, what do I do? Where do I go? I said, relax. Take a good horse, fire away. He's just done a great job. He's aggressive with it. He pops them off when they're ready. He has a blast when he goes over there. He's run horses in France, England. He's like the king over there coming from the U.S. So, and they're entertaining. You know, when I took horses to Royal Ascot, I've done that a couple times. One very bad experience, horse fell out of the gate. Rosalind went straight to her nose and lost her jockey a few years ago. That was kind of a rough day. But you know, look, we met the Queen that day, so that was pretty neat too. And they helped us with some of the expenses, so the owner was, you know, not too much out of pocket. But reputation, no. Take a good horse, have a good time, take your best shot. If you pull it off, you're a hero, and if you don't, you know, you went on a nice vacation.
Cricket, putting aside the subject of retained riders, but if you've got a jockey that you normally use at home and you're travelling a horse, say to Melbourne, where it's a different environment, do you give consideration to using the local jockey that knows the lay of the land better than perhaps the jockey that you would normally use at home?
No, I would take my jockey. Unless there was the jockey would have a retainer with someone else, then I would use a local jockey. I don't mind.
It doesn't make any difference to you?
But it always helps when someone knows well his horse. It does help. But if you have to change, you know, jockeys, they're good enough to quickly get on a horse and you give them 2 or 3 advertised, and then they can run them.
So is it more important for the jockey to know the horse or for the jockey to know the lay of the land as far as the track goes?
But the track, what they do usually, jockeys, they go onto the track before the race if they don't know the track, and they look carefully at the track. But in most of the country, they're very flat. The worst tracks are in Europe, where they go up, down, left, right, wherever you want to go, straight. It's worse in our country than in America, when you always turn on the same hands, or most of the track. But no, I wouldn't say it's... I would take my jockey if he knows the horse, of course. He can ride him everywhere where the horse would go.
Ignacio, do you have any experience?
I agree. I'd take my jockey.
Yeah, and Kenny?
No, I like the course.
Okay.
So this week we're dealing with the English Oaks filly, and so Le Peru rode her in the Kentucky Oaks, but so Oliver Pellier is going to ride her in the English Oaks. So we're making arrangements for him to come from France to get on her at Epsom, so he can get a feel for her a little bit. We're going to try to do that 1 week out, but that particular course is extremely tricky because, you know, the uphill, downhill, and I'm more worried. If I took a jockey that had never been across that ground, no thanks. I don't want him guessing which direction to go. And so in that case, we need somebody that understands. You know, in Chantilly, you know, you've got a different angle, and it's not quite as steep, I think, as Epsom. But you would want a French jockey that's used to going right-handed, and to bring an American jockey that's never been much right would be a disaster.
Okay. So was that an easy decision for you, or was it one that you had to sell to your owners, or was it a no-brainer as far as you were concerned?
I think it was a no-brainer in that case, you know, or in this particular case. And then I ran a horse named Noble's Promise in the St. James Palace, and he had to run a small turn to go right-handed, and the jockey actually took him from the one path to bring him out to the three, and the horse thought he was going to go left. And so he had to rearrange, and so that didn't go all that well that time either. But, you know, and you have to train your horse to go right when you go to those tracks too. And so you have to be kind of mentally thinking about what's going to work for each particular horse. Do you need to adapt to the track, or do you need a jockey that really understands the horse? I think the track's pretty important, especially in the European tracks.
Okay then. Josh, your experience with the European trainers or trainers outside of America coming to the Breeders' Cup, do they show concerns over whether a particular rider might be good for them?
They usually bring their own jockeys. Sometimes they're, depending upon the horse, they're kind of worried about some of the sharp turns, but there's certain courses in England that they can use to get used to that kind of tight left turn. But for the most part, it's never really an issue, and they'll always, it's not a problem. You bring Ron Moore, Frankie, those kinds of people to ride your horse.
Yeah, so you haven't found it to be a situation where it's of absolute importance that the jockey knows the course. They can all adapt it once they're at that certain
It's like
level.
what Cricket said, all of our race courses are pretty much the same, and all the jockeys that have come have usually ridden in several Breeders' Cups. So they're used to that oval. Doesn't take a lot to get used to.
Okay then. And we're about to open up the questions to the floor, but before I do that, I'm going to ask the trainers that if they were racing administrators rather than racing trainers, what they would do differently to make it easier for people to travel horses. But from an administrator's point of view, I'll give you first bite of the cherry before the trainers step in. If there's one thing that you could change, or there's one thing that you could make better to make it easier for people to come to the Breeders' Cup,
like a magic wand?
What would it be?
I would pay 100% of everything it takes for them to get there. Hotels, flights, expenses paid. I would make sure it doesn't rain. That's about it, probably.
One might be a little bit easier than the other.
Well, not with a magic wand. You could do a lot.
Kenny?
I don't know that there's anything major that they need to change. They really is very efficient at this stage. You know, really nothing.
Okay. Ignacio, sounds like racing administrators are doing a pretty good job.
They are.
So far.
I think there's always things that you can get better, but like I said, I think that on the major things, we're doing a great job. The the other thing is the day-to-day. I mean, the trucks that do it better than others, that treat people better than others, that host better than others, and we have to look into that trucks and try to, imitate them and do what they're doing. But in general, I mean, there's not really much big things that you can do on that point. Essentially, we have probably to get better there and, try to bring more people, try to be more, at disposition of them, to help them in what they want to do.
When we're taking horses to Europe, the IRB is so easy. But when Europeans or Australians or South Americans come this way, the licensing needs to change for them, because these are respectable people that don't need to be fingerprinted, that this is ridiculous. I mean, what did Mrs. Payson say? That racing horses destroyed her career as a bank robber. Because they've got 30 sets of fingerprints from Virginia Kraft Payson. I mean, I stole that quote from her, so she's still living. I wouldn't want to insult her, but look, they need to eliminate all that here, and it's just too difficult, and you've got respectable people that don't need to be, you check their background and license them and let them run their horse.
And is that a state-by-state decision, or is it more overarching than that?
Well, state by state, but the national licensing is a great thing, and they have made steps forward, but it's still not streamlined, and you get all these jurisdictions and all the badging and all that stuff. I guess it's important, but the prints in particular need to be eliminated, in my opinion.
Okay. In cricket, you've been around the world. You're perfectly positioned to answer that question. That if you're an administrator rather than a racehorse trainer, so you've taken the pay cut to be an administrator rather than a world famous racehorse trainer. What are you going to change to make it easier?
Well, I think everything is done to make life easy for trainers. The license things, yes, when you license in one country, you should be licensed in the world. If your country doesn't take your license away, you should be able to be licensed everywhere. It's true that when we come to America, when I race in California, I've got a license in California. If I race in New York, I've got a license in New York. But that are small details. If not, I think everything is done quite easy to make easy for everyone.
All right, so that's it's time now to turn it over to the floor. Is there anybody that would have any questions of our panel? Yes, sir. I think there's a microphone coming your way.
I'm Duncan Taylor from Taylor Made Farm, and my question is: our customer is the person that wagers on the horse. And it seems very archaic to me that when I'm at the Breeders' Cup and I'm betting on a horse that's coming from a different jurisdiction, and I see all these blanks, and at the very end, finish fifth. And that's all the information I get. So is there anything being done to try to give horse bettors the best information they can so they can enjoy the experience, be more engaged, and like their experience of betting on the horses?
Definitely it's part of an issue, because their workouts aren't timed, their races aren't usually fractionally timed, but they're starting to develop that at the moment, and it's getting a lot better so that you can pass on that knowledge. Because like you said, the timing is so much different than the way we do ours. So there's just less knowledge to pass along. But I think Europe has gotten better about trying to develop that and put in, well, Longines, who sponsored a lot of this, has done a good job getting that kind of knowledge and passing it along.
I certainly think that there's things that jurisdictions can do to be more streamlined. Like some jurisdictions, they start timing shortly after the start, whereas some, they time out of the barriers. So punters around the world have to try and assimilate the timing as best as they can. Or a horse ran a certain time in say Japan, as he did in England, as they did in America, and it can be difficult for the layman, the punter, the person that puts his hard-earned money on the horses, to be able to try and correlate the information when the basic way that information is being produced is not on kilter with each other. So I think there's certainly things that racing racing administrators and racing regulators at the top level can do to assist in that process.
You know, Duncan, the job Equibase does is fantastic, but they're limited mostly to North American racetracks. And I would love to see Equibase chart callers in South America, Europe, so that they can take all the information and put it in one spot. And I think you're probably European. I think they use Weatherby's, if I'm correct. And I'm not sure exactly where all the information comes from, but you've got to aggregate it. It's a tough job. And Hank Zeitlin, formerly with Equibase, he understands all these details. But I don't think it's the fault of the Breeders' Cup or anybody in the U.S. We've got to figure out some sort of system that puts it all together.
Because timing for you is very important, Duncan.
Well, I'm not saying all the time, but I would like to know where the horse was at each point of the race.
Yeah.
So I can determine whether he's going to be coming from behind at the pace of the race or how the race might set up if I'm going to make a wager. So that, basically now we're getting nothing. It's not just time. We're not getting position in the race, or we're not getting hardly any information.
Well, there also needs to be a standardized, the poles need to be standardized to the inch. And the timing systems, you could have one racetrack where the 16 or the mile poles set, 40 feet different than someplace else because of a positioning on the racetrack. And, put timing systems in across the United States and other tracks is a very expensive proposition. And of course, the circumference of every racetrack's different, and you've got different surfaces and different, yielding one day and firm. So there's a lot of factors, but certainly it's more art right now than it is science.
I think we have a great opportunity as being such an international sport. And if we focus more on the customer, which is the person betting on the horse, in all of our endeavors, if we look at those people as the most important, we're gonna achieve a lot more than if we're concentrating on our internal problems.
Here's another company to support is Trackus. Trackus is a great thing. I mean, you can see how many feet further your horse ran than the winner or shorter. And if you had Trackus worldwide, I mean, this is a product that needs to be promoted at every race course. So any race course going to put in Trackus, you can actually, analyze the distances, the ground that they covered. It's a great, great product.
But you see, in France, we don't have it. We don't clock our horses in the morning like you do because you train on the race course. Our tracks are going up, down. It's very difficult. The time in a race gives you an idea, but it's very difficult to take the time because it's never the same ground. We race on polytrack, we race on grass if it's soft or anything. Some race course who goes up and down, the time is not the same. Even on a mile race, you wouldn't have the same because we turn left, we turn right, we go mile up the straight. So it's very difficult for you to take exactly the time as a granted. You know what I mean? It's for us, a trainer, we don't take that. We look at the time, but it's very difficult to say. It gives you a real idea of what the horse can do by the time.
Well, there's certainly more of a reliance on timing in here in America than there is in perhaps other jurisdictions. But I think the point's well made that if we're trying to sell a product to an international audience, it's very important that areas such as position in running and those type of things are advertised if it's difficult to make up ground on a particular day due to the circumstance of the race. Well, that gentleman there, he wants to know whether the horse normally gets back or the horse normally sits up the front to so that he can make a value judgment on where he puts his money down.
But sometimes trainers give different orders to their jockeys. It's not always, we don't ride the horse always the same way. If there's no pace or if there's pace in a race, so it's always difficult to take everything for good.
But with the proper information,
Just, we've got a microphone there.
Yeah, I was just saying, timing and all this, don't consider it for yourself. Consider it for the person that's wanting to bet on the horse, because that's our customer. Yeah. And the more that data they have and the more they can analyze, the more they're going to bet and feel comfortable placing a wager. So, in America, they even analyze the trainer. They're analyzing everything the trainer does. And I'm not saying America's the best way, but I'm saying whatever data you can that is important out of your race, let's provide it to the people so they can make the best wager.
Okay, we've got another question up the back there.
This is a question for Kenny McBeak. Kenny, when you are taking a horse to Europe to run, and you know that the horse will have to run the other way, to the right, do you start training that horse in America in the afternoons, the other way around, or you just wait until it gets to Europe to do it?
Well, the first visits that I took, I waited and sent the horse to Newmarket. Hardbuck went to Newmarket early, and then because I had walked Ascot and had an idea of what kind of hills he would have to run, then I adapted the training. It certainly went right-handed. We used Warren Hill a lot, where we could go up and then turn right, got him used to going the other direction. I shipped him over to the July course at Newmarket, and we worked him from the 7 to the 2, with 7 furlong pole to the 2 furlong pole, because the rise to the 2 at Newmarket more resembled the Ascot finish, the finish at Ascot. When you pass the 2 furlong pole at Newmarket, it trends downhill. So yeah, you have to think about all that. You have to practice with the horse which direction they're going to go and how they're going to finish and win. And it's a little bit tricky, but same thing. You love the challenge of it. Horses are much easier to deal with, than people realize. And going right-handed for the American horse is really not that big a deal. But you do have to give them a little bit of, like anything, training.
Ignacio, do you have any experience with that? I'll get to Chantilly a bit shortly, but do you have any experience with that, the left-handed, right-handed
No,
scenario?
not really, but I would agree that, the tracks, racetracks in Europe, they have a lot of movement that we don't, especially going up and down the hill. We're more worried about going down the hill than up the hill. For a horse, it's more easy to go up the hill than down the hill, I would say. So I think that, like he said, it's very important, if you're going to ride there, to take the horse before and do whatever you can to help him to understand, the course that he's going to face. Because they are so different one to another one. And they're all, it's not like here, it's completely different. And you need to find out what is best for your horse. If a horse likes to go up the hill, the horses that they hate going down the hill, and we can see that in Kentucky Downs very often. You take a horse that, it looks like a kill on a race, and when they go down the hill on the back straight, they put like that, and they put the brakes, and they don't want nothing to do with that.
I'm glad you mentioned Kentucky Downs is if people are worried about going to Epsom, Ascot, or Chantilly, you see Kentucky Downs, it's like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And horses don't get to train there. They go straight in, they run fine. Sometimes that course gets a little soft and we have a rough, if we get too much rain, that meet. But the European courses are easier than even a course like Kentucky Downs. And I didn't mention from Joe Nelson's question, today we use Magdalena, my farm, where we train right-handed or left-handed, uphill, downhill. So we've got a lot of options, but horses handle it fine.
Cricket, you've obviously got the advantage in France of having left-handed and right-handed racetracks, and the facilities at say Chantilly are very world's best. So how important is, a gentleman's question, if you're taking a horse to a foreign racetrack to get it ready to prepare it for what it's going to?
When we used to come to America, France Gallo built a track close to Chantilly at La Morlaix on the left with the same tight turn that you've got here. And when we go, if we come over, we do and work there just to get the horse used to a tie turn. But if I go to Epsom to run the Derby, and I did it a few times, we take our horses either to Chantilly on the other, and instead of going this way, we go on the other way because it goes more downhill, or we go to Compiègne, another race course with the downhill, just to get the horse used to different tracks.
And how often would you do that in preparation for going to Epsom?
I would do it twice before a race.
Okay. All right, are there any other questions out there? Because we've still got a little bit of time, so if you have a question for the panel, then feel free. But while we wait for that, Josh, the levels of prize money in overseas jurisdictions as compared to the level of prize money that a trainer might have at his home in his home staging authority, how important is it for the enticement for a trainer to take a horse over there if he's got comparable prize money where he doesn't have to leave his backyard?
Well, it's big for us in Europe. Like I said, we're lucky enough to put up $28 million worth of purses. And of course, we'll hear a lot of stuff being in Europe. Well, it's dirt racing. Not really. We have 6 races on the grass worth $11 million. That $11 million just on those 6 races, you can compare that to just about any other day on the planet. So it's a big enticement for that, and we pay down through 8th place. So just the money, it's a massive kind of deal.
Kenny, when you took Hard Buck to England, I take it that you were leaving behind races here in America that would have been worth considerable amounts of money to go overseas. Why? What's the attraction to bypassing the prize money that you've got at home, where you don't have to leave the normal environs, to go over there?
Well, we really didn't. You know, he had run in the United Nations, which I think at the time the purse was maybe $350, and the King George was $1.5 million. There was every motivation in the world to go over, and the filly that we're getting ready to run in the English Oaks, the motivation there, okay, I can run her in the Acorn, and I run for 300, and it's a flat mile, which is not long enough for her. That's the only grade 1 until the Alabama in August, and then she runs for 675 US in Epsom, and then we've got the other issue, which is she's been second in 3 grade 1s. And her value as a broodmare is dependent upon us trying to win a grade 1 with her in the next X amount of time, whether she can do it as a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. So we have a window, and you know, I think this is as good a spot as any. You don't know how she's going to match up against the European fillies, but she's proven herself at a high level already, and we got to knock out a grade 1. She's a full or a half sister to a grade 1 winner. You know, what she bring to the broodmare band as a grade 1 winner is a valuable, you know, it's one of those intrinsic value that the owner, she might not be able to measure it in her bank account, but it will eventually measure in her bank account. So whether you sell a foal out of her, the foal's going to have more value as a American prospect or to an American buyer or a European buyer if she proves herself on different continents.
So an American Group 1 race as compared to an overseas Group 1 race, for the connections, it's more appealing to have that international Group 1 on her record from a future perspective?
Well, I think if you keep her as a broodmare and let's say you breed her to, you know, Stallion X or Y or Z, and then you bring the foal to auction, I think those that know the mare or knew the mare and where she competed and how good she was are going to be more attracted to her foals and give it maybe a second look and maybe a second or third bid. So you know, a lot of this stuff for me, it's not so much about win percentage or ego. I've got to do what's right for my client, what's right for her horses or his horses, and you know that there are just so many details like that. And you know, we'll bring her back from Europe and we'll probably point to the Alabama, assuming you know everything goes the way we hope. And you know, so like I said, Group 1 win is really the motive as much as the purse.
At cricket, you train for a number of the prominent breeders in France. The domestic Group 1 on a mare's record or on a future stallion's record, is it worth any more, worth any less than taking a horse overseas and having an international one on the record?
Well, it's always, you know, when you win abroad, it's always nice. So if you win the Oaks or things like that, or you win the French Oaks, and you go to the sale, as you said, it's always more money for the progeny and for the value of the horse. It's important. So if we can go abroad, we do go. To win races abroad, it's important.
Okay. Ignacio, when you race a horse away from your jurisdiction, are you representing yourself and your owners, or is it bigger than that? Are you representing your country? Are you representing your jurisdiction?
I think that I represent my team, my owner, and I mean, I don't think that it's a country thing. I mean, it's like what I do is, when I go away, is because I think that I have a better spot for my horse away from home, and try to deliver for the owner, for, get that horse better on a better spot. On price-wise, he's gonna be expensive if he wins grade 1, grade 2, or whatever. But I don't see it as a country problem. I mean, it's like it's a sport. I mean, and I'm sport. Like, you take some shots with a good horse and you try to put it on the best spot that you can find. Sometimes it's around home, sometimes it's away from home. Here in America, we have the advantage that we can travel a lot. We have several places that we can run. We have with very nice purses, and we have also the ability to go to Europe and run when we think that we have the horse. I mean, it's not that a big problem.
Cricket, the same question to you. I know when Black Caviar went to England, she went for Australia rather than going for herself. They sat up at midnight and they congregated in Federation Square in Melbourne to watch the race live. So it was a big thing for the country, not just a big thing for the connections of the horse. Once again, when you're taking a horse away, are you representing your jurisdiction? Are you representing your country when you do that? Well,
yes, we're representing the owner. We try to do the best with the horse, but of course, yes, you're representing your country. When you're in a country and your anthem comes up and you hear the Marseillaise or something like that, it gives you, if you win abroad, it's always a little better than in your own country.
Kenny,
that's the way I feel.
Yeah, when you're at Epsom, will it be very much a case of representing the United States when you're there, or is it just doing the right thing by the horse?
Absolutely. When Hardbuck ran second in the King George, we got a bigger applause than the winner. And yeah, there were a lot of American flags flying around. I hope that the English Oaks has more international interest with us participating, and I hope a lot of Americans are watching the race. It's a great race. The English Derby, I'd love to win the English Derby one day if I had the right horse. I had a horse one time, I couldn't convince the owner to go. So it depends on the situation, but I think it's definitely you represent your country.
Josh, a lot of parochialism associated with
Absolutely. We, just about every year we have around 30 horses that come from outside North America, and it's really dependent upon the ownerships. I think the most memorable thing in recent times was a horse that, not like he was bred in Mongolia, but when Mongolian Saturday won the turf sprint at Keeneland, you knew Mongolians won that race. So, and it was a very, very proud thing for them.
When Mystical won in Dubai, they say that the applause was better than any Dubai World Cup ever. Yeah. The Indians, it was quite a day for them. All right, folks, we're just about to wrap up here. So if we have any questions from the floor, yes, sir.
Hello, this is Sebastian from TaylorMade 2. I was just wondering who is in charge or responsible for the quarantines for the countries between South America and here, and how we can help to make it better, like European horses coming to race here.
Josh or Ignacio?
Well, here the United States Department of Agriculture is in charge of everything quarantine-wise. We'd have to make quarantine great again, it sounds like. It's a government-to-government kind of issue, especially when we're working with the South Africans to try to reduce that It's a USDA working with whatever jurisdiction and government rules that in that country. So Ignacio might know in Argentina what government.
Same as here, is government that, everywhere in the world is a government that,
There should be a lobbying effort.
Yeah.
There should be a lobbying effort to try to make that easier, where the quarantine is certainly much better for the horses.
Or at least make it special for certain races, or, easier for that.
All right. We're running out a bit of time. Perhaps just the gentleman up the middle there, and then unfortunately we're going to have to wrap it up because time's beaten us.
We can't hear you. I can't hear.
I worked as the track announcer at the defunct Ladbroke DRC racecourse in 1988. And I was there in the daily racing form, got their points of call by having an announcer with somebody sitting beside him whilst he called the race, taking the notes of the different points. In Jamaica, we use the patrol camera film. And if we are going to say our points of call are at the half mile, 2 furlong, 1 furlong winning post, what happens is that the team views the patrol camera film from the different angles, and we'll stop it at the half mile, and they can go and check who's in front, who's in second, how much the distance is between, and that's how we produce our points of call down there. So just a suggestion for Europe, if you can use the patrol camera film to produce points of call, why not do it? Thank you.
There you go, cricket. That's a job for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, I think time's beaten us, sir, unfortunately. So, ladies and gentlemen, could I ask you to a special round of applause for Cricket Head Marek, Ignacio Correas, Kenny McPick and Josh Christian.